Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So we're going to go through a couple of ayats of Surah 48 and kind of discuss Sakinah. I had mentioned something about Sakinah in a video, so one of the brothers asked me about it when I was saying how you would notice or something along those lines about why you don't have Sakinah and how people just have different type of turmoils and a lot of just different things going on in their life. So up here on the board, I have effective versus ineffective as well, because we're going to touch on that briefly. So like effective, successful in producing a desired or intended result, in which that's going to be important. But let's touch these ayats real quick. Surah number 48. So indeed, we have unlocked for you an evident conquest, that Allah may forgive you what has passed of your misdeeds and what is yet to come. Right? So your past sins and your future sins. Right? And complete His blessing upon you and guide you to a straight path. Right? So Allah has unlocked for you an evident conquest, that Allah may forgive you what has passed of your misdeeds and what is yet to come, and complete His blessings upon you and guide you to a straight path. So, like when I showed the brothers how to study their Quran for implementation, although we can't be a part of this particular conquest, we need to go look into the deen and see what actions and what deeds can we do to get our past sins forgiven, our future sins forgiven, and for Allah to guide us to a straight path. Of course, you're going to need tafsirs and you're going to need hadiths. Okay? And then, once you look at these actions, start to see, use your Google. I know the new brothers, y'all don't really have those type of books yet. But use Google and see what all you could come up with. Like, of course, we know there's particular type of fasting, right? Just to throw out a couple of things, there's certain things that you could do to get your sins forgiven from the past year and the upcoming year. I don't want to name too much, just because I want to leave it up for y'all research. But just breaking your Quran down, and then what leads where Allah can guide us to the straight path, the path that leads to Allah Azza wa Jal and Allah's pleasure. Okay? Not the path of deviation that leads to Allah's anger, you know what I'm saying? Or the path of deviation that leads to Allah's wrath. Okay? Like we told about in Surah Fatiha. And of course, or the path that leads to the hellfire. So what deeds can we do that leads to Allah guiding us to Sirat al-Mustaqim? So you got to look into that. Write those down. What I could do to get my past sins forgiven, my future sins forgiven, and what leads Allah guiding me to Sirat al-Mustaqim. And support you with a mighty support. Now, there's things that you could do. You also want to look into that. because there's things that you could do where Allah Azza wa Jal, where we're informed that Allah will become our seeing and our hearing for us. Okay? So you want to look into those things. So just like by me just giving a couple of examples, you could tell that I know what some of these deeds are. This is how you start to bring the Quran into implementation, where your deen can become effective. You understand? As opposed to being ineffective, lip service, right? Where your deen is effective, you're actually doing, implementing, right? So, Sakinah. So here's another ayat, right? Here's the one ayat in this surah. This surah speaks about Sakinah 3 times. So let me see. It is Allah who sent down tranquility, which is Sakinah, into the hearts of the believer to add iman to their iman, to add faith to their faith, to strengthen their faith. So if we know Allah is the one that sends down Sakinah to the heart, and when Sakinah touches the heart, it adds faith to your faith. It strengthens your faith. What do we add? Now, what do we add to the list? What are the things that we can do to where Allah Azza wa Jal will send down the Sakinah to our hearts, right? And then if you find some deeds, if you find things, right? And when you truly understand Sakinah, you will change the way you will start to get effective, inshallah ta'ala. You will start to get effective in your deen, because not only do you want Sakinah in your heart, you want Sakinah in your life. You want tranquility in your life. Because like I said, an example, and I'm just being honest, some people don't have peace at home. Even when they live by themselves. They torment their own selves. Right? Some people don't have tranquility, Sakinah at work. Some people don't have Sakinah when they go places. They might, like I said, they might go to a restaurant, even a fast food place, and get into it with the people there. You know, everybody, they talk to 10 people in the day and get into it with 8 of them somehow, some way. And this is the majority of their days. They don't have Sakinah. So you want to look into, what can I do to where Allah Azza wa Jal brings that Sakinah into my heart and into my life. Of course, what's the weapon of the believer? Dua. So of course, you want to ask Allah for these things, and you want to ask Allah to guide you to these things. And then when you know about tawassul, not no Sufisms and none of that. When you know about tawassul and a wasila, what are extra things that I can do to get my dua accepted, that Allah brings Sakinah? See, these is things, this is effective deen. Not just sitting around talking about, oh, we need to have Sakinah. Let's talk about how to get Sakinah. Oh, the Imams of the past had Sakinah. The Imams of the future will have Sakinah. Okay, alhamdulillah. But let's look into how to get Sakinah. It ain't going to do no good for me to just sit around and say, we need Sakinah, 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 every time I do a talk, and do that for the next 5 years, but then none of us have Sakinah, including me. This is ineffective deen. It's speech. It's fluff. So look into that. Obtaining Sakinah. Right? So, to add faith to their faith, for Allah belongs the troops of the heavens and the earth. Right? And Allah has always been all-knowing and all-wise. So, as we look into that, then if Allah is saying He has always been all-knowing and all-wise, then we don't fall into the error or the debate with individuals that say Allah can't have wisdom because we have it. Because His creation can be wise in certain areas. So we don't even fall into that. You know what I'm saying? There's no need to hate. There's no need to fight. Because they still Muslims. You never know. A day may come where they may come up out of that belief system. You see what I'm saying? So you don't want to be too harsh on them. Because a day may come where that person might end up being your best friend. You see what I'm saying? Plus, it's not from the deen to be overly harsh with an individual that has mistakes, because they may not know any better. They may be under a system of tarbiyah, and this is the only thing that they've ever been told. See, because we're falling into a time where we accept personalities over the truth. And then some of us is set up in a system where we actually believe if the people that we're not listening to, because the way they have groomed us, not any one particular group, just this is all of it. Like if you've been groomed from the beginning of you taking your shahada that is Hanafi or nothing, you may believe that for a very long time. And you may believe if I listen to a Shafi'i scholar, then I'm innovating. I'm listening to a deviant. Then I'm off Hanafiya. But that Shafi'i scholar may give you something that's effective. This is a mind play. But then you stuck under somebody who's fluffing you and may possibly be profiting off of you. You see what I'm saying? And then fluff you so that the mind play is we're the only. Because like I said, this is multiple. This isn't to one particular group. This is multiple. There's a multitude of individuals that do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, let's say your introduction to Islam was a Sufism. Oh, if I listen to this Sunni, I'm off Sufism. Like, they have a way of making you feel like you're sinning by not listening to them or not attending their masjid or their circle, when they're fluffing you and keeping you away from what can be more beneficial and effective. Teaching you how to talk, but not how to implement. And just fluff you with, well, we're Sufis. These people were Sufi. Let me read you the book about how they were Sufis. And how this great person was a Sufi. Let me read you a book about his life and how he was Sufi. We need to be Sufi. It's Sufi over nothing. Our masjids, our group, our people. But then at the same time, the only thing you know how to say is, we got to be up on Sufism. This one was a Sufi. That one was a Sufi. but then you can't effectively implement. You want to avoid these things. Implementation. Right? So Allah has always been all-knowing, all-wise, so as to enter believing men and believing women into gardens beneath which rivers flow, abiding therein, and to remit them their evil deeds, and that with Allah has always been a great triumph. So Allah wants to enter the believing men and believing women into Jannah, right? Not hypocrites, not idolaters, but like I say, believing men and women is not just the ones who say, I believe in Allah, but they can't pass those tests. And I'm saying that because the ayahs in the Quran, just because you say you believe, do you think that you won't be tested? And these tests are to separate and distinguish who truly believes and who don't. See, you got the Quran ayahs that say, when they're with you, they say, yeah, we truly believe. But then when they with their other friend, they say, oh, we was just mocking. So this is about true belief. True belief has action, speech, and actions. Implementation. Be about what you actually talking about. Okay? Being able to implement this Quran. Okay? So like they say, some of the best amongst the people is those who learn the Quran and teach it. Some people think that means teaching you how to just have an empty recitation. No, don't get me wrong. We are supposed to want to be able to recite the Quran. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward the people who teach people how to recite the Quran. But you have hafids of the Quran that can't implement it. But we know from authentic hadiths that a day is going to come when people are going to have an extremely beautiful recitation of the Quran, but it's not going to go past their throat. It's not going to enter their heart. They're not going to be able to implement it. So when it comes to being one who's trying to teach the Quran, you want to teach how it's supposed to be interpreted, right? And how it's supposed to be implemented. See, the Quran is a way of life. How do we know that? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best example for all of us to follow, implemented it. He lived it. So it's a way of life. Let's continue. Right? And that with Allah has always been a great triumph. And to punish hypocritical men and hypocritical women. So the way with Allah is to punish the hypocrites, men and women, and idolatrous men and idolatrous women. Those who are up on shirk. Those who worship idols. And when we understand shirk completely, idols, some people, celebrities are their idols. Some people allow people's personal opinions to become their idols. They be so worried about what people are going to say to them, they too scared to be themselves. they're worshiping public opinion. So when you understand what true idolatry is and what it truly means to be a hypocrite, these are things that we need to look into. What's being a hypocrite in Islam? Right? Because as you can see, one way clearly leads to being what Allah accepts as a believing man and a believing woman. And you're rewarded with Jannah. And then where you end up being a hypocrite, man and woman in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jal, or an idolater. You need to look into what puts you into these states. But one of the things that help avoid this thing is getting Sakinah into that heart. Let's continue. Women, hypocritical women, and idolatrous men and idolatrous women, those who harbor evil thoughts about Allah, they are encircled by evil, and Allah's wrath is up on them and has cursed them and has prepared for them hell. And what an evil destination. So, I'm going to extract this for you guys. You seeing what Sakinah does. When Allah sends that Sakinah down, you can be encircled in Sakinah. Right? But when you make the wrong choices, Allah said those who harbor evil thoughts about Allah. We make, even though they're using the word English and evil in English, when you look at where it's referring to just like your basic sins, they may put it as evil deeds. Because going against the deen of Islam is evil. Feeling like you can go do all this stuff that Allah says don't do, that goes against what Allah Azza wa Jal tell us to implement, and because of your own desires, you actually corrupting and hindering the Muslims. This is evil. So then you could end up being encircled in evil and bad deeds. You could be in a masjid where you could sit up and say, we gotta be the Sufis. We're the very best, nobody but the Sufis. Right? Let me tell you about the life of this one who was a Sufi. Let me give you the creed about this one who was a Sufi. Only us Sufis, only our masjid Sufis. But the people in the masjids fighting and killing other Sufis at the masjids, meeting up at the masjids to sell and buy perks. You know what I'm saying? Leaving, dragging your wife from the masjid just to go home and beat her for no reason. These things is evil, but it's cloaked under, we're the Sufis. Nobody is better than us. Even them other Sufis over there, we don't claim them, so they don't have a haq. Passing on diseases, having sexually transmitted diseases and not informing the people that you're marrying. This is evil. So sometimes you have to look at the real environment and see what's effective and what's not. So you can see how when certain things start getting encircled in evil, Allah Azza wa Jal is giving us the jewels. So when we see that, once again, what we got to do, we got to look into what caused these things and brings down that from Allah Azza wa Jal so that we can avoid it. And this just your basic Quran. You need to go look into that. Okay? So like me sitting around saying, let me tell you about the biography of a great Sufi. How is that going to help you? Not saying that you shouldn't learn this was a great Sufi. But I'm only telling you about the biography of this great Sufi to further emphasize you need to be Sufi. You need to call yourself Sufi. You need to stick to us Sufis. You need to only come to our Sufi masjid and no other ones. But fixing this evil that's within you, keep selling your perks. I'm not going to talk about that. Keep beating your wife. I'm not going to talk about that. Keep ripping off your husband. Keep being married and dipping off asking other men for money so you can give your husband money to go get some perks for y'all. We're not going to discuss any of that. But we're going to discuss the creed of this Sufi so that you can know you're supposed to be Sufi, and we're just going to keep doing that for year after year after year after year. It's not effective. It's not effective. Where's the implementation? So let's continue. Right? They are encircled by evil, and Allah's wrath is upon them, and has cursed them, and has prepared for them hell, and what an evil destination. For Allah belongs the truths of the heavens and the earth, and Allah has always been almighty, all wise. Indeed, we have sent you as a witness, and a bearer of glad tidings, and a warner. So again, Allah re-emphasizes that Allah has always been almighty and all wise. How can you debate that? How can you debate that? Right? So, let me touch one more ayat, two more ayats about Sakinah. But take from that, get into this surah and break this down. What to do, what not to do. This leads to this. Let me look into the things that bring about Sakinah. Let me look into the things that will have me engulfed in an environment of evil. Right? Let me figure out how to implement what I should do and what I should stay away from. Let me look into that. Okay? So look. So we're going to go to ayat number 18. Same surah. Surely Allah was well pleased with the believers as they pledged allegiance to you under the tree. And He, Allah, knew what was in their hearts. So He sent down Sakinah, tranquility, upon them, and rewarded them with an imminent conquest. So let's say the situation, their heart might have pumped a little bit of Kool-Aid about the mission. Well, I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to rock it out. Fisi bilillah. Fallahi. Right? I'm finna rock this out for Lahi with Allah's messenger. Although I'm not too sure about this. Then Allah sent that thing down to their heart. And then it strengthened them. Just like it said in the first thing about Sakinah. The strengthen that Sakinah came down to strengthen the faith that they already had. I'm just saying, let's just throwing a narrative out there. You know, I'm not too sure about the outcome. We might be outnumbered. This one over here, he a good brother, this and that, but I don't know about his knuckle game. You know what I'm saying? He kind of mild-mannered. You know what I mean? So then Allah sent that Sakinah down. You want to look into these things. Another ayat, right? And just to continue it a little bit, so Allah rewarded them with an imminent conquest and a multitude of gains for them to capture. For Allah has always been almighty and all wise. Further putting emphasis on Allah has always had the wisdom. There's nothing more wise than Allah. How can you debate that? Because his creation can have some wisdom. You know? So let's touch another one. So this one is, we coming up to ayah number 26. Those who have denied filled their hearts with chauvinism, the chauvinism of pagan ignorance. So this form of Christianity that is here today is full of paganism. Right? How do we say that? Because your birthdays, your Christmas, your Easters, things that they feel like have origins in Christianity, they're full of pagan holidays. A lot of the teaching is paganism. Okay? So when we have the chauvinism, like when they be like, you a male chauvinist, you a female chauvinist, you a chauvinist, right? Some of our ways and of our chauvinism, let me do this like I do for the new shahadas, to show them how you study. Okay? So instead of chauvinist, let's look up chauvinism. Chauvinism, listen at this right here, is the belief that one's own group is superior to others, and is often based on factors such as gender, nationality, or race. It can also refer to the behavior that demonstrates this attitude. Right? So, like it's saying, this particular chauvinism that comes from ignorance, or how I'm pointing out, this Christianity type of chauvinism that we may have. That's why I'm putting the emphasis on. See, the Quran is referring to this paganism. This doesn't come from belief forms of chauvinism. Like, we're the Sufis. We're the only Sufis. You can't listen to any other Sufi but us. You can't go to any other Sufi masjid but ours. We don't care if they call themselves Sufi. We haven't accepted them as Sufis. We're the only ones. We're the best. We don't care about how much education they have. We don't care that we can't even do their homework. That means nothing that we can't do their homework or pass their classes. We haven't accepted them as Sufis. So you can't listen to him. He's not Hanafi, so he's a Shafi. You can't listen to him. It doesn't matter that if I stood in front of his professor and I couldn't answer no questions. This is a form of chauvinism that we shouldn't have. and then reverse it and say what we're doing to everybody else is what people is doing to us because one person may told the truth about us. Quran al-Karim speaks against this behavior. But if I fluff you, let's read about the life of this Sufi Imam, because it proves how we're supposed to be a Sufi. Let me teach you about this other great Sufi, because it teaches us that this is the creed of Sufism, and we're supposed to be Sufis because nobody is better than us Sufis. You want to know who's the best Sufi? Let me write down some names for you. Quran al-Karim speaks against this behavior. And that's why when they use certain words, go look them up in English so you can see what they meant by it. And I've been throwing this out so that you can understand and grasp this concept before we got to the ayat. Walhamdulillah ta'ala. But let's continue. But Allah sent His Sakinah down upon His messenger and upon the believers and imposed on them the word of mindfulness of Allah, taqwa, of which they were most worthy and deserving. For Allah has always been all-knowing of everything. Surely Allah has fulfilled His messenger's vision and truth. See how beautiful Sakinah is? See how beautiful Sakinah is? Effective versus ineffective. You might put yourself in a position where you've fallen into a form of chauvinism that's impermissible. You might put yourself in a position where you could talk about this Sufi Imam, you could talk about the creed of this Sufi from 1,000 years ago, but then when the times come, you can't even implement Quran al-Karim. You can't teach how to implement Quran al-Karim. But then it may be a Sufi who can teach how to do it. But you say, stay away from them. This is problematic. And like I say, there's a multitude of this going on. Fanaticism. We need to be mindful of this. This is a powerful sword. So again, we're emphasizing, go through and start learning how to abstract. Sakinah is the type of Sakinah that Allah sends down is implemented in this surah 3 times. Allah names and attributes is implemented and discussed numerous times in these surahs. These things we need to look into. Things that's going to lead to us being in an evil environment. What more evil of an environment is husband and wife fighting tooth and nail over things that's not Islamic? You're not praying. You're not fasting. You're drinking. You're smoking weed. You're visiting women. You're visiting men. But we're not going to argue about that. We're not even going to have a discussion about that. Right? We're going to argue over you said hi to somebody at Walmart. But you not praying, that's not a problem. We're going to argue and fight over the toilet seat. We're going to almost come to a divorce because you left the microwave with 10 seconds on it instead of the time. Not knowing whether after you got done eating, you could have been hungry, threw something in the microwave real quick, and just took it out and went to go eat. Then once you got done eating, you probably was going to come reset the time. But they don't even give you a chance to do that. But they're not praying, they're not fasting. We're not even going to discuss those things. But we're gonna break up and fight because you got bacon and sausage on the plate. You want cheese in your grits instead of butter and sugar. You like fish and shrimp and grits. No, I ain't fixing that because only butter and sugar go on grits. That's not an evil environment. Even the dean teaches us, if you have a husband and wife that you really don't want to be married to, or if the wife is in iddah, but y'all still in the house, you're supposed to live with them in kindness. You think you're not supposed to live with them in kindness when you're not in those situations? Having sexually transmitted diseases, marrying somebody and you don't even inform them? That's not evil. That's not hypocritical. Huh? So, but what we gonna do? So I'm finna wrap it up. So I want to teach y'all something about systematically learning some type of deen and understanding tarbiyah. So I want to show y'all how difficult it could be to understand this. And this is when it comes to Daleel, right? Check this out. The order of precedence in which evidence is cited. Listen to this. Manifest evidence is given precedence over the hidden. What does that mean? Manifest evidence is given precedence over the hidden. What does that mean? That is evident and interpreted. So the phrase literal meaning is given precedence over its figurative meaning. So when it comes to Daleel, what if somebody says, y'all looking at that as literal, but you're supposed to use the figurative meaning. But when it comes to Daleel, the literal meaning is given precedence over the figurative meaning. But what if you don't know no better? So what if you going out pushing the opposite of how Daleel is decided? And then you arguing with a chauvinist group that don't even know how to have this type of conversation with you because tarbiyah hasn't given. So this is the order. Manifest evidence is given precedence over the hidden. That is evident and interpreted. So the phrase literal meaning is given precedence over its figurative meaning. Let's continue. Evidence that necessarily leads to sure knowledge, which is is given precedence over evidence which leads to probable knowledge. That is like the mass transmitted reports and solitarily transmitted reports. So the first is given precedence unless it is universally applicable, in which case it is rendered particular by the second, just as what preceded of the Quran being rendered particular by the Sunnah. What does that mean? Who can really understand that? But you have people going back and forth and this and that, and they don't even know what these type of things mean. So, just like when I be stating, when people say certain things is from the deen, and like I say, if that was such a common knowledge, you shouldn't have to look through books of hadith like you're looking for a needle in a haystack. Because it would be multiple, like for instance, if the Rasul prayed with his hands down to his side, or commanded the people to pray with his hands down to his side, you shouldn't have to look for that like a needle in a haystack. So, if the Rasul commanded or prayed with his hands below his navel, not knocking that, not saying any of it is permissible, I'm not issuing out any fatwas. I'm just saying so that you can get an understanding of what this is referring to. But this is because of tarbiyah. So, if the Rasul commanded that or did that, you wouldn't have to look for that hadith like you're looking for a needle in a haystack. So, if you have multiple people saying, not only did the Rasul pray this way, but he commanded us to do these things. And then you find one person that says, well, I seen one of his companions doing this. One person saying, well, I seen a companion doing this. And then another person step in and say, well, I seen that companion with his hands above his navel. But then these is the only reports about it. But like it says, that is like the mass transmitter reports. Numerous people talking about it, and solitary transmitter reports. One person, right? They solo in this belief. Just like the wiping your face. One person with no type of takrij, no explanation for why it was done. What is given precedence? But see, certain individuals do too, and listen, this is fiqh. So even if a particular madhab went with a solo report, whether it's da'if, whether it's Hassan, over 60 Sahih hadiths, what do you go with? But see, some people don't know these things, so let alone people just arguing and debating, and they don't even know what takes precedence. And even before even touching this, like you hear me say all the time, if these things was from the deen, it shouldn't be like looking for a needle in a haystack. See, when you understand these things, then you have a better way of implementing what's from real Daleel. Let's continue just a little bit. But just off surface, without any explanation, or me giving a small explanation, who will really know what this stuff is even referring to? This stuff would sound like Chinese to some people. So when you see certain people keeping the people subdued for the purposes of their benefit, these are things that make you go, Let's continue. Something stated from the Quran and Sunnah is given precedence over analogical reasoning. Analogical reasoning is qiyas. Something stated from the Quran and Sunnah is given precedence over analogical reasoning. That is, unless what is stated categorically is of universal applicability, it is then rendered particular by analogy and has proceeded. So, if Quran says Allah is above his throne, if Quran says Allah created Adam with his hands, if Rasulullah Sunnah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Sunnah says Allah is above his throne, above his creation, if it says Allah, you're the prophet that Allah created with his two hands, why would your analogical reasoning, why would your qiyas deserve precedence over what's in the Quran and the Sunnah? See, and then people want to throw around terms like fiqh. People don't have fiqh. But this is fiqh from the order of precedence in which evidence is cited. Who's going to put qiyas over Quran and Sunnah, especially when that qiyas didn't come from Quran, Sunnah, and ijma of the Salaf? Let alone ijma of the Salaf or Salih. This ain't even ijma of the Salaf, period. Even when you mix in the ones who was deviants. This ain't even the majority of the Salaf, good and bad, didn't have these beliefs. But you got all this arguing, you got all this debating, even between two groups that might have a form of chauvinism that's not permissible. But they both arguing and debating based off of something that ain't even given its proper precedence. But without some explanation, who would know what this stuff means if you haven't went through a system of tarbiyah? Daycare, Head Start, kindergarten, first grade. Just like a person who been to a class, passed the class, teaching the class, and then people who never took a real class or don't read no books talking about how the class should be taught. Let me just continue and then I'm done with this last little point. With these last two. Manifest analogical reasoning, qiyas, right, is given precedence over concealed qiyas. Similarly, a causative analogy takes precedence over an analogy of similitude. Who know what that means? Who know what that means? If something from the Quran and Sunnah that is stated categorically is found to change the default state, the default of absence, which when presumed to continue is expressed as presumption of continuity, it is clear that the categorically stated phrases are used. Who know what that means? Otherwise, if it is not found, the original state is presumed to continue. That is, its default of absence, and it is acted in accordance to. Who know what that means? Who understand that? And this is what I'm saying about tarbiyah, an effective deen, man. Who know what that means? How are you going to learn it? And then if somebody pick up a book with that stuff in there, but they don't really know what it means, they don't really understand it, they can possibly miseducate you and have you up on their desired meaning of it. But they might use big words, fiqh, mujassim, and all these other little Arabic terms that they think nobody else understands. But they're twisting Daleel. This is what the Muslims is. So I'm finna end on this. Effective. Let me adjust this because this might not make sure my head in. So let's say you given a khutbah, and this is something from Imam training, and we gonna tie in these Quran ayats, right? So let's say you given a khutbah, you in the masjid, you have a store owner, right? You have a store owner. We're not going to put any ethnicity or nationality on them. Just a store owner. They sell, we're just going to say liquor. So you know what I'm saying? No. Hold on. Because I want to, let me just erase that. Hold on. Because we want it all in there. We want the whole Islamic ruling on there. They sell intoxicants. They may have legal marijuana. They may have vapes. They may have over-the-counter Percocets. You know, they may have over-the-counter uppers. Right? Then they got your beer, your alcohol, and your wines. And pork. Right? So, during store hours, because they behind the counter selling their pork and intoxicants and might even be ripping people off, they also delay salah, or they don't pray, or they don't pray. And then on top of selling, they might indulge. They might also indulge. But then, next to store owner, we'll put hustler, who also sell intoxicants. So while they in the dope house, because dope and stuff is in there, they may also, or somebody might be there, they may also delay salat or don't pray. Right? Or they may have a permissible business. But at this business, they mix with najis, right? They mix with the najis. So, but because they mix with the najis and they got certain things going on, they also delay or don't pray. But these people in your masjid, so also people with People with boyfriends and girlfriends, right? Gangbangers, right? So next to gangbangers, we're going to also put swindlers. So, in this masjid, we're going to say 80% of the people in the masjid fall under this category. 80% of the, and we just naming a couple of things to prove a point. 80% of the masjid falls under this category. What should What should the cook bars be about? Huh? What should the cook bars be about? Huh? Think about that. When we talking about effective versus ineffective. Islam calls to, let me reword that. And then we finna wrap this up. Let me put this up here too. Adulterers. Because you might have people who marry and then they have sex with a boyfriend or a girlfriend outside of their marriage. So, if Muslims calls to Islam, all of this goes against Islam. What should the cook bars be about? What should the cook bars be about? Your job as a Muslim, not just an imam, even if it's in you, is to what? Is to warn against this. Don't indulge. Don't ignore it. So, when you look at the Quran ayats, if it's 80%, the community is 80% of this, why would Allah bless this community? Why would Allah bless this community? Is the Kubar supposed to be about how to be Sufi? Really not even teaching you how to be Sufi, but how to call yourself Sufi. Huh? Is the Kubar supposed to be about how some form of an Israeliyat, right? Like when two rams get together and they get into it and they bump heads on the day of judgment, whichever one initiated is gonna be held accountable. We just gonna leave all this be? What is the Kubar supposed to be about? No, I ain't gonna discuss none of that. I'm gonna leave that at Allah. They might not like me. But then, or let's leave them ignorant and sell them books about Sufism. About Sufism and its creeds. Books that we did. Not from ourselves though. Books we just translated. Not from our knowledge. A book that's in Arabic overseas and we just translated it to English. Not something we could sit down and write for ourselves from our education and then sit down and sell them books and workbooks. But all of this, let's put this in 6. Because this is a thing right here. Spreading diseases and marital abuse. Spreading diseases and marital abuse. 80% of the community. But the only thing we're going to do is teach you how to call yourself a Sufi. Drug deals outside the masjid, in the masjid. Huh? Store owners selling and indulging in intoxicants and pork. Hustlers selling and indulging in intoxicants, not praying. And what should the Kubar be about? And then on top of that, this 80% turns into 85% over 5 years. 85%, it turns from 80% to 85% over 5 years. Every Friday, this is supposed to be going from 80% to 70% to 50% when it's effective. But the only thing that's happened, people just learning how to look the part more. We only learning to look and sound the part. We learning to look and sound the part. How is the masjid this every Friday? 80 to 85% every Friday for years? How do we call that effective? This ain't even the mannerism of what Islam is to be in a masjid, and this ain't no secret. By the imam, the administration, and so on. And we're not putting no race on this. We're not putting no creed on this. So we're not saying whether they Sufi, Shiite, Ashari, Salafi, Athari, Hanafi, Hanbali, Maliki. We're just saying period. What should the kutbars be about? What should the classes be about? You think about that. You think about that. And then you looking at individuals who don't know how to implement the Quran. Implementing the Quran isn't even a theology to them. It's just a book that you read to get hasanats. We read the Quran because we're supposed to. I read the Quran to get the blessings during Ramadan. That's the only time I read it. Why would I sit around and read my Quran when I could read about the creed of these Sufis so that I can better learn how to call myself a Sufi? Not saying for the people who is Sufis. When you look at evidence, like I showed you, if Quran is precedent, Quran and Sunnah is precedence over all other evidence, why ain't Quran and Sunnah precedence over these creeds? Because I'm putting you in a bucket so that you will stick to me and me only while I sell you books. Not saying this is for everybody, but sometimes you got to see what's going on here. This ain't no shots to know, but like I said, this is multiple things. Call to Quran and Sunnah, not to your madhab, not to your creed, not to your minhaj. You can teach that within it, but that doesn't take precedence over Quran and Sunnah. Like, let's say, I'm not going to say that because some people are not ready for those words because of what they think of them. But I'm going to end on that, man. You know what I'm saying? This is just a little discussion for after Fajr. And I just want y'all to think. Take them Quran ayahs, man, and start learning how to implement your Quran. And for all these individuals who talking about what shouldn't be talking about, no, I'm not going to say nothing about that. And we steady losing the Muslims to these things, but they still call themselves Muslim to the point where now the majority, this is starting to become the majority. When this is 80% of the masjid as opposed to 20%, at what point do you do something? At what point do you do something? At what point do you do something? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.